When kids don't have the language skills that they need to learn to read and write, my number one thing that I have SLPs focus on when they come to me for recommendations for their therapy is vocabulary. And so a lot of people are really unsure what I mean when I say that they should be working on vocabulary, because a lot of times people think of this as just naming words or being able to identify words, because that's what a lot of vocabulary assessments ask kids to do. But really, I'm talking about much more than that. When kids come to an unfamiliar word in a text, one of the ways that they actually figure out how to understand what they're reading is by using strategies to learn words that are unfamiliar to them. And in order to be able to do that, they actually have to have a pretty good vocabulary. They actually have to have pretty good language skills to be able to use words to learn more words. And the problem is that a lot of times when kids don't have a very well-developed vocabulary, or they don't have a very good sense of sentence structure, their comprehension suffers, and that makes it harder for them to read. And because it's hard for them to read, they're sitting there, they're not really understanding, and they're not really getting a vivid picture in their mind as they're reading. And because of that, because they're not able to visualize what they're reading, they're not able to process and make sense of the messages that they're reading about in the sentences, well, that can cause their comprehension to suffer. And if you're not comprehending what you're reading, it's pretty boring and you don't want to do it. And nobody wants to do something that they're not good at. And so that's why kids who don't have the language skills needed for those high level comprehension skills, a lot of times they avoid reading. And as a result, they don't get practice, and then they don't build vocabulary. And reading is actually one of the best ways that kids in the school age years can build their vocabulary skills. So they're actually kind of avoiding one of the activities that's actually going to help improve their language skills. So it's kind of this catch-22 where they're avoiding reading, and then they're not good at reading, and then they're also avoiding things that are going to help them build the language skills that they need to become better readers. So one of the most powerful places that therapists like SLPs and other people who are working on language and literacy can intervene is by building their language skills, specifically things like vocabulary and syntax. But the important thing that we need to know is that a lot of times people aren't really sure what that actually means when I say that we're working on vocabulary. To be clear, what we want to do is we want to build vocabulary in a way that's not just kind of, what a lot of people do, which is like, drilling flashcards and things like that and memorizing word definitions. That's not what I mean at all. That's not super helpful. What we want to do is help kids think about language differently and teach themselves to self-question and use strategies so that they can actually start to learn words independently. So part of what we can do is actually build specific knowledge of words, but while we're doing that, we have to do it in a way that builds metacognitive awareness and builds the awareness of how their brains work so that they can use strategies to learn more words. I actually got into this in a recent episode of the Are They 18 Yet podcast, my show for clinicians who want to be better leaders and make a bigger impact with their services. And if you want to check out that full episode, just go to drkarendudekbrannan.com/blog and look for episode 67. And you can also subscribe to the Are They 18 Yet podcast on most of the popular podcast directories. And to find this specific episode about vocabulary, just search for episode 67.